know people who should be successful, but what? They're not successful. Why?
So that's his why buy. But what is he afraid of?
My personal style of education, but still entertain them, bring them along with stories, right? If you're a real man, what do you do? I'm not the only one.
You can't wait to tell your spouse. You can't wait to tell your colleague. You can't wait to go to work and tell somebody. And you're like, oh my God, I can't wait. So what happened?
If you haven't seen my TV show, you should get cable. That's what you need to do.
From doing a TV show to doing corporate events, I've been so lucky to connect with many passionate entrepreneurs worldwide.
What I've learned from a business perspective, because this is the formula for success, no matter who you talk to. Attitude will drive your behavior. Would you agree? And your behavior will drive your consequences every single time.
We got the concept. Okay, we got the concept. We got the equipment, right? We got the brand. You guys got that. And then again, we got the content that we create. That's the easy part. This is the big one, the big C, which is the commitment.
What should you do? That's right. All right. 10Xers, do not fail me. True test. Here it comes.
There's skill, and then there's will. Listen to what I'm saying. There is skill, and then there is will. And here's the interesting thing. I know a lot of people who have a lot of skill, but have no what? Will, right? You ever look at somebody who's successful, and you say, why them? Why not you? Yes, okay, that's me too.
You have more control, but your costs are also going to be what? Higher.
Now, here's where some of the magic is starting to kick in.
You can talk to any CEO in the B2B business, any CEO. You walk into his office and they only care about three things. People too. Yeah, he with the suit, put it up. There you go. I hope you can see this. I'll try to draw big. Let's pretend for a moment that I had 7 territories. You remember I wrote that out? Yes or no? Boom. Territory 2, territory 3, all the way to territory number what? 7. So now I've segmented my market.
So content is going to start being created by machines. And I'm telling you right now that those people, you guys, the content creators that connect with people are the ones that are going to win. Some people think, well, it won't work for my industry. Really? It'll work for any industry. Trust me. The majority of the time when we're looking to fix something, repair something, or learn something, where do we go? YouTube. We don't even want to read anymore. We go to YouTube. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong.
When you're doing your thing, beautiful things begin to happen. It's like the law of attraction kicks in. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're in line with the universe. Everything works. And when you do your thing, everybody gets an automatic MBA, which stands for what? Mega Bank Account Money. Are you with me? So we don't want to do a thing. We want to do a what? Beautiful.
All right, put it all together for Victor Antonio. Here we go.
All right, there we go. I'm not here to mess around. You ready to learn? Yes or no?
That's how it works in today's market. Whether it's B2B or B2C, you see the similar pattern. But how do you just, in other words, say you got to start doing these things, pushing them, but also encouraging them. Oh, look at this. This is where it gets, dude, this is like so interactive with audiences, Matt. Can you imagine this with your customers? Check this out. Now, what does all this have to do with selling? It has everything to do with selling.
All right. How's everybody doing this evening? Hope you're doing exceptionally well. My man Doug Lehman, I see you, not ghosting the live in layman's terms. By the way, post your comments, and what I'll do is after I finish this small mini presentation, I'll then go in and answer some questions. So let me know, where you're from, who you are, and I don't know, just say hi, Matt. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. Internationally, just hope you had a great weekend. So anyway, let's jump into this content about ghosting. It's an interesting problem that we seem to have. And, I hear different opinions on ghosting, on why certain customers ghost you. So, for example, when customers don't show up, that's what we mean by ghosting. So, here's the big question. What can you do to avoid being ghosted by a prospect? In other words, somebody who's potentially going to buy. Now, let me set this up because we got to frame the conversation. And if you've never heard the phrase ghosting, I define it as simply saying I made an appointment with the prospect, and when the meeting came, the prospect never showed up, maybe never showed up for a Zoom call or a demo, right? That means you've been ghosted. Now, when we talk about ghosting, there's so many aspects of ghosting, but there's too much to cover this evening in this Sales After Dark episode. I'm going to give you about maybe 10, 15 minutes of content, and then again, I'll answer some questions at the end. So when we look at ghosting, I asked myself, why do people ghost you? Why don't they show up? Let's say they said they were going to be at a demo, right? You scheduled a demo, they don't show up. Why? I thought about this and I go, well, there's several reasons why people ghost you, right? Maybe they didn't want to disappoint you. That may be right, in other words, they may have decided not to buy. They're going to say, they just don't want to disappoint you. The other one is, some people just hate to explain why they may have, for example, changed their mind. Happens, people change their mind all the time. Maybe some people, they just don't like confrontation, right? In other words, they don't want to call you and tell you, hey, I'm really not interested in your product, so they just want to avoid confrontation, right? Some people are just passive aggressive, don't want to deal with it. The last one I would say is probably some type of anxiety, right? In other words, there's fear. There's a reason they don't want to meet with you, right? In many cases, it could be just themselves. When I talk about ghosting, people always say, well, Victor, one of the reasons people ghost you, in general, if you're the seller, is because you provided no value, right? That may be true, but let's just say that I didn't even get a chance to talk to the prospect and they just simply ghosted me after they set the appointment. Many cases, especially in today's market, there's so many options out there that customers are overwhelmed with choices or options. In many cases, they lack the confidence in themselves to make a buying decision. So they say, you know what, I'm just not going to make a decision. In other words, instead of making a decision and then maybe being wrong, they rather not make a decision and just kind of leave it at that. And so there's lots of reasons. And I'm going to create a course in the Sales Velocity Academy about ghosting. But today I just want to cover the psychological aspect, things you can do, something tangible you can do to reduce being ghosted, okay? Now, as you know, if you followed me, everything that has to do with sales influence, all about behavioral economics, I love to understand why people do the things they do. What's the psychology and how can I leverage the psychology? So I asked myself the question for this. How can I use, psychology, right, behavioral economics, to kind of get people maybe to show up more often than not? In other words, what tips or strategies could we implement to help us increase the show-up rate and not get ghosted as much? Again, there's no way I can help you eliminate ghosting altogether, but if I can help you increase a couple of percentage points, I think that would be worth your time. So let's get into the presentation here. And what I want to do now is talk about a study. This is a fascinating study. I want you to imagine for a moment that when people say things, right, there's something called the rule of consistency. And I first came across this when I read Dr. Cialdini's book, Influence. By the way, if you've never read the book Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, I highly recommend it. In there, they talk about the rule of consistency. And let's talk about it. I'm going to simplify it. The rule of consistency states this. When you verbalize a commitment, in other words, you verbalize it, you make it public, you are more likely to follow through. This is important. Psychologically, this is important. If I verbalize, in other words, if I say it out loud, if I verbally commit to something, I'm more likely to follow through. Keep that in mind. I'll come back to that. Now, if you don't follow through, you feel what they call cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is that feeling that, you just don't feel good about what you've done. In other words, you feel crappy about yourself. Let me give you an example. Let's say you asked me, and let's say in this case, I'll say Doug Lehman. Doug Lehman comes up to me and says, Victor, in a month, I'm moving. I need somebody to help me move my stuff. Could you help me? Would you help me? And I say, Doug, yes, I will, right? I make the verbal commitment, yes, I will, Doug. Doug takes that to the bank. He's going to depend on me, right? Now, as time goes on and the date draws near, I'm thinking, oh, that's right. On this date, I have to help Doug move. And we've all been in that situation where you made a commitment, you verbalized, you said you were going to go or you were going to do it. And then all of a sudden, as that date approaches, like, I really don't want to go. I really don't have time to help somebody like Doug move, right? I love Doug, but I don't have time. You know what I mean? In your mind, you try to get out of it, right? And let's say that you bend your morals and you come up with some lame excuse, right? Well, in your mind, it's a good excuse, but some lame excuse of why. In this case, why I can't help Doug. I come up with some excuse. I say, Doug, I stubbed my toe. Oh, sorry, I can't help you, right? Now, I hang up, and how do you think I feel after hanging up? That moment, how do you think I feel? I probably feel horrible. First of all, because I lied, right? I may have stubbed my toe, but I could have really helped him, right? That is that feeling you have when you made a commitment and then you don't follow through is called cognitive dissonance. In other words, your actions don't match what you committed to. So keep that in mind. That's cognitive dissonance. And what we try to do is when we feel cognitive dissonance, we try to rationalize, to kind of bring it in alignment, so to speak. In other words, I can say to myself, no, I mean, really, my toe did hurt, and I would just make it worse by helping Doug. So you know what? I'm justified in not helping Doug move. Again, we rationalize these things to kind of get rid of that dissonance, that guilty feeling we have. So the point here is that once you verbalize something, you're compelled to follow through, because if you don't, you're going to feel bad about yourself. Keep that in mind, because that's what we're going to leverage. Now, here's an example I want you to look at. Let me go here. Sorry about that. Now, they did a study in a restaurant, right? And one of the problems they were having is that people were making reservations, but then not showing up, right? There were no-shows. They were ghosting people, so to speak, right? So what they thought about was this. They were always saying, they would tell people, look, if you make a reservation, please call us, right? If you're going to cancel or change your reservation. In other words, hey, please call us if you're going to change your mind. Thank you. That's what they say. And again, they still had a lot of cancellation, ghosting, right? But then look what they did. Instead of making a statement, because that's what this is, a statement, they said, well, let's phrase it as a question. And they asked the question, will you, key phrase here, please call us if you're going to cancel or change your reservation. And then you pause and wait for a response. You pause and wait for a response. And what you're waiting for is a verbal commitment, like, yes, I will call. So in other words, I will say, will you call if you're going to change or cancel your reservation? Pause. They're going to go, yes. Now, on their side, they've made that verbal commitment. Much like I'm going to help Doug move, they've made a verbal commitment. Now, if they decide not to show up, they're going to have that cognitive dissonance, right? Because they agreed that they would call. And what they found is by simply going from a statement to a question, they had an 18% reduction. Again, not perfect, but they got an 18% reduction. Let's call it 20% reduction in cancellation rates. In other words, no-shows rather. So in other words, it improved it by 20%. Now, that's not bad, but let's kind of go to another example. Here's another study. I find this one fascinating. They did a blood drive. We always want people to donate blood, right? So they did almost the same thing. Again, we'll put you on the list as coming. Thank you. That was a statement they made, right? Then they said, no, let's change it a little bit. We'll put you on the list as coming, okay? In other words, okay, like, is that okay? And then you had to actually give them the verbal confirmation, and they would say thank you. And they went from 70 to an 80%, 82% show up rate. In other words, that's an additional 12%. So in other words, if 70% is 7 out of 10 people, now they're getting 8 out of 10 people, and maybe just a tad better. So in other words, they got an extra person to show up for every 10 people. That's not bad. If you can get that type of improvement, that makes a big difference. Let me show you what I mean, because you're probably looking at those numbers and says, well, okay, 10%, Victor, but what's the big deal? It's a big deal. For example, let's say you're with a SaaS company. And let's say you use the same thing, but let's change the verbiage a little bit. You'll say, please call us if you're going to cancel or need to change the time for the demo. But you would change it to what? This right here. Will you please call? Now, don't put email, call, right? If you're going to cancel or change the time for the demo. Wait for the confirmation. Now, think about it this way. If you're able to get an improvement, in this case, for example, in the restaurant business, you got an 18% improvement. That's 2 additional people. But let's be conservative. Let's be conservative, because let's talk money, right? Let's talk money and how ghosting can make us money. Let's go to this. I ran these numbers for you, because initially you'll look at this and go, yeah, what's the big deal? 10%, Victor, not a big deal. It's a big deal. So we have the example of 70% for the blood drive going to 82, which is 7, and then now 8 out of 10. In other words, you're getting 1 extra person showing up. But now think about this. Let's run some numbers, hypothetical numbers, right? That means if I'm doing a lot of scheduling per day and I can recover, in other words, get 1 more person to show up per day, just 1 person. If I do, let's say, 10 demos a day and I get 1 extra person to show up, that's great. That means in a month, 22 more or less working days, that's 22 extra demos that I get to do in a month. Let's say that my close rate is 40%. So 22 extra demos, 40% close rate, that means I just closed 8 extra sales that month. If I multiply that by 12, that's 96 extra deals per year. And let's say that it's $1,000 each sale. That means that's $96,000. And let's say that each customer that I bring on board has a customer lifetime value over 3 years of that much. In other words, this stuff begins to add up. So let me go through it slowly again. If I can just get 1 extra person to show for a demo per day, right? That's 22 people in 1 month. Times 12, if I convert, and then times 12, I get extra 8 sales per month. Not bad. Again, 96 extra sales per year. You can go through the numbers. So this makes a difference. So by simply using this strategy of will you show up and getting it to verbally commit, if we believe the restaurant data, if we believe the blood drive data, simply asking a question, not making a statement, will you call me if you're going to cancel or need to change the time for the demo, can make all the difference in the world. Think about your business. If you can get 1 extra person to show up to your meetings, right, or demo, what would that mean to your business? Run your own numbers. And again, it's fascinating when you look at it from this perspective. Another way of looking at it is like this. I like to run numbers once in a while. So, year 1, I, again, generated an extra $96,000 in sales. Now, this is recurring revenue for a SaaS model, right? That means every time I bring on a customer, they stay with me for 3 years. So that's 96,000 for that 1 customer that stays with me for 3 years, right? But then, again, if I were to repeat this process every year and just continue to bring people on board in 1 extra time, you can see that the revenues start really stacking up. So again, I know it's a quick way of looking at numbers, but you get the idea that the more people we can bring on board, that 1 extra person per day, 22 per month, and if it's recurring revenue, or there's a customer lifetime value associated with it, and the customer stays with you for 3 years, that's revenue that begins to stack as the year goes on. So that was one strategy. Again, simply just using that, will you call me, if you're going to cancel or change your reservation. The person says yes. Again, increase in actual show up. Here's one more strategy I want to share with you. This one also has some data associated with it. This one was fascinating because, so tip number 2 is that you send a confirmation 1 to 2 days prior to the actual meeting or presentation. And what they found is fascinating. Whether it's email, text, or phone, again, everything, it depends on how you do it. But they would send something like this. We're looking forward to the demo on this date, this time. Please let us know if your plans change. So again, what they found is simply by using this confirmation. So again, it's kind of a 1-2 punch, right? We get the will you call me, right? And then you get the confirmation via email or text, right? Just remind him, or phone call, you leave a voicemail. And all of a sudden, again, depending on how you do it, whether it's email, text, or phone, your show up rate increases by 20-30%. So think about this, just these 2 simple strategies. 1, will you get a verbal commitment? Because again, once people say they're going to show up and they verbalize that, they have a hard time not doing that. Again, they feel that cognitive dissonance. Strategy number 2, if you follow up with an email, phone call, or text 1 or 2 days before, you can have an improvement in your show up rate. So just those 2 strategies can help you reduce the amount of ghosting you're currently experiencing. And last but not least, let me just remind you of what this is and why this works. Let me erase this right here. Again, when you verbalize a commitment, you are more likely to follow through. That's what we're leveraging. That if you can get them to say yes, and again, I got it within the Sales Velocity Academy, there's a course called Blocking Objections where I talk about the psychology of why this works. For those of you who have not been in the Academy, by the way, we're running a Sales After Dark special. There's the website. There's the discount code, SAD40, Sales After Dark 40. You get a 40% discount off the Sales Velocity Academy. And that is all I have for you. And I'll take any questions that you guys have right now. We got a lot of people on board here. Holy buckets. Let me look at this real quick. So, by the way, check out the Sales Velocity Academy. By the way, I will be building a course just on ghosting, because again, there's so many aspects of getting ghosted and how to reduce it. These are just but 2 tips of the many that you can deploy to get more people to show up and not cancel. In other words, to reduce your cancellation rate. So who do we got? We got Doug, thank you, man. Rustam, last name, that's a tough one. Taimuradov. Tell me if I'm close, man. By the way, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Micah, what's happening? Maria, my cousin, I love you. You know that. Paco, LeBron, what's happening? It's been a while, man. Victor always dropping the knowledge. Thank you, man, for showing up. Doug, thank you again. Mile Claimer, good evening to all. Thank you. Public declaration, honor it, says Doug. Mike Janice, brother, it's been a while, man. Use the law of reciprocity. I'm going to email you this free guide, and we can talk about it on our appointment. By the way, Mike brings up is very interesting. The rule of reciprocity says if I give you something, you feel compelled to give me something back. And so I would agree with that. The only asterisk I would put on there is it has to be something that I do value. So make sure that when you give something, it is valued by the receiver, and then the rule of reciprocity kicks in. Maybe that'll be another Sales After Dark that we can do. Rustam says, I think when you ask for a verbal commitment, you create trust and integrity. When you ask for a verbal commitment, I don't know how to, Rustam, I don't know about that. When you ask for a verbal commitment, I think it's not so much, hopefully you've built trust during the conversation, right? And there's some integrity that you've shown through the conversation. When you ask for a verbal commitment, will you show up? I think you're just simply asking them for an agreement. Like, in other words, are you going to be there? So that's how I would look at it. Paco says, best money I've spent in my sales career. Thank you very much. Jim Duffy, what's happening? Does scheduling an appointment more than 3 weeks create more no-shows? Great question, Jim. There's here's what's interesting. Here, by the way, I love, that's a great question. They did an interesting study, Jim. And then I'll ask you, you can kind of respond. For example, let's say, Jim, I asked you, Jim, let's say we want to get together, right, for a demo. I said, Jim, when would be the best day for you? Wednesday, or would Friday be best? Or let's just say Monday. Would tomorrow or Wednesday be best? What do you think the majority of people would say? If I asked you today's Sunday, I say, would Monday or Wednesday be best, right? And the answer is that most people will choose Wednesday, because the further out the date is, I personally don't see it as a commitment yet. Much like my example with helping Doug move, right? It's 30 days away. I don't really think about it. It's that far out, right? Now, what happens, to your question, is that as the day goes near, so I think it's easier to set an appointment 3 weeks out. That's my first part of my answer, Jim. It's easier to set the appointment to get them to agree to an appointment the further out the date is. So if it's 3 weeks out, I'm more likely to say yes than no. If you ask me, hey, Victor, can you get together tomorrow? I'm going to go, no, I don't have time, Jim, right? 3 weeks from now? Yeah, sure, man. Book it, right? Because it's 3 weeks from now. Not thinking about it yet. Now, here's what's interesting. So the second part of the question is then, getting somebody to say yes 3 weeks out is easier. The problem is, as the date arrives, and let's say that this is, week 1, week 2, week 3, as you get closer to the date, the person starts feeling this anxiety. Like, first of all, why did I set up this meeting? Is it still a priority? Is it still urgent? Do I still want to get together with this person? So they come up maybe with ways, right, to begin to think about maybe canceling. What I would do, if that was my cadence, and I know that I had to set things out for 3 weeks, what I would ask myself, Jim, is what can I deliver in terms of value as we build closer to that date? And you know this. I know you know this already, Jim. But in other words, so let me put it this way. So if here's week 1, week 2, week 3. Here's the big day that we're going to meet. So what I would do is after week 1, I would maybe send them something. And this is where it gets real tough, right? One, I can send them, say, by the way, let's say I got an appointment with you, Jim, in 3 weeks, right? I'm meeting with you and I don't want you to cancel. I say, Jim, by the way, based on our conversation, I ran across this information that I think we'll be able to talk about during our meeting in a couple of weeks, because now it's only 2 weeks out, right? So I can send you, let's say, some type of case study, Jim, right? Maybe as I move into week 2, I can send you some type of video with some piece of insight, right? Telling me I'm looking forward to seeing you. Like, hey, by the way, why don't you go ahead? I've set up a login for you so you can actually log in, create a profile, and maybe so when we do the demo on this day, I can use your personal information. Or I can do this, Jim. I can ask them, hey, by the way, we're getting together next week. Here's what I would love to do. I would love to put the data in your context. Is there any way you can send me XYZ information so that I can contextualize the demo for your specific needs? So that's how I would handle something that has a 3-week window. That was a long answer, Jim. Sorry about that. Hopefully that worked. Let me know if that helped a little bit, because that's a tough one. That is a tough one. So what would you put in the subject heading? Oh, Jim, that's a tough one, because it really depends, right? Because ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers, Jim. We're always looking for, I'm going to give you the basics, right? It's got to be a value statement. I don't like using the over-the-top language, right? What's good about it is you can probably go to ChatGPT. It'll give you a bunch of things to say that you can use as suggestions. So I would try to figure out what the value is. For example, I talked about this in my past workshops. So I'll give you this one, Jim. I always say, I talk about the value trinity, Jim. And the value trinity is this. The value trinity is, if it's a B2B scenario, okay, let me just do B2B. If it's a B2B scenario, people care about 3 things, Jim. That's all they do. And the value trinity is this: increase revenue, reduce costs, or help them expand their market share. In a B2B scenario, that's all they care about. Jim, how can you help me increase revenue? Jim, how can you help me reduce costs? Jim, how can you help me expand market share? Now, what if, Jim, what if in your 3-week cadence, like in week 1, I said, I'm going to show you how we're going to help you increase your revenue, and let me show you how we did it with another company. Week number 2, leading up to it. Hey, by the way, here's another case study of a customer that we helped, that our system helped them reduce their costs. And maybe 2 days before the demo, you say, hey, by the way, we can also show you how we helped other companies expand their market share. So those would be my headlines: increase revenue, reduce costs, or something like that. That's the cadence I would use. So let me know what you think of that. It seems I should put a cadence when amount of days out. I love the Trinity. Yeah, you could do it a couple of days out. I have no data, Jim, so I can't be like, here's how you do it, right? Because there's so many ways of doing it. But anyway, give me some feedback. Share this one with folks. Let me know what you thought of this. I know it's short. Like I said, I'm trying to keep these really short and tight because it's Sunday and people will just want to go in and out. Zico Radinsky. I'll just call you Z. I like Z better. Z here. Victor, you need to do these bi-weekly in 2024. Double the fun. This is gold and will 10x our pipelines. I love the Trinity. We are blessed. You know, Z, I actually literally had this conversation with my daughter today, Camille. By the way, Camille's the one that runs the Sales Velocity Academy. So if you ever have any questions, talk to Camille. So we always get together 2 or 3 times a week to talk business. But anyway, we've had this conversation today. And we both agreed that once a week is probably good because it's like what I want to do is, just like I did tonight, I hope, is not just give you like shallow information, like, basic information. Try to kind of go in a little deep and give you some examples. And so to create that type of content requires time. And so if I had to do 2 a week, it's just too much time given my travel and other things I got pending. So we're going to do it once a week on Sundays. And maybe maybe once in a while, I'll just jump on and do, another one. Let me see. What do we have on tap? By the way, this is the next one. So this is the next Sales After Dark. I'm doing something called Shift the Conversation. This one is so good. This one is one of those strategies that you know how some people are just focused on, for example, somebody's focused on price, right? You're just focused on price, right? The question is, how do you get them off the price track and put them on the value track, right? If they're only focused on delivery, right? How do you get them off that track and move them over to quality? Get the idea? So that will be the next Sales After Dark. And again, we'll do these for now once a week. We'll see how that goes. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's about my time, a little over time, but thank you for the questions. Again, please share this with folks. That would help me out greatly just to get more exposure out there. And any feedback you have on how I can make this better, did I miss something? Should I have done something differently? I have no ego. Love feedback. Hit me up. On that note, Victor Antonio signing off, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care, guys.